We're starting. I think you all know the pack drill. Welcome to the 63rd. I believe it's the 63rd. I think it is. Hang on.
It is. It is.
63rd FMBug, amazingly. So tonight we've got Robert's going to talk. Well, Gary's going to give us some Apple news, which will just be a recap of the last thing that you've been watching for about 3 seconds.
It's going to be short. I can tell you. It's going to be very short.
Then we got Robert. He's going to talk about FM Ham security module. I'm going to give you a quick update of the text to speech on iOS, which Ian kindly sent me a file for to help out with. Gary's going to talk about recovery best practices pre and post server breach.
Sorry, Johan, you've already seen this, mate.
You'll have to see if Gary's polished his speech any. And then we'll have a help session. If anyone's got anything they want to talk about or they want to ask about or need help with, and then we'll segue into the virtual bar as always and talk as long as people want to, as long as someone can bear to be there. So without any more ado, let's get on and have a 3-second recap from Gary of the Apple event.
There's a little bit more than that. I've got one thing. Yeah, the Apple event, in case you just missed it, or at least you were all watching it because we were streaming it here. Probably shouldn't have been, but we were. There's new Mac Studio, which is the high-end Mac, which is a fraction of the cost of an Mac Pro. There's a new phone, which is basically the same as an old phone, but in green. There's a new studio display, which isn't a 6K display, it's a 5K display. So it's not as good as the one before, but it is half the price. And they've done an iPad Pro with the M1 Max chip in it. So you've got the power of a fully desktop machine in an iPad. From the point of view of bringing this back to Claris, everyone should rush out and buy the studio and run their server on it. And we'll see whether it works, and we can report back to Brad and see whether or not it's still working and it can address more than one core. So sorry, little dig. But I will certainly be looking at, I won't be looking at any of those I run in a virtual environment, but the point is the desktop machines, I will certainly look at that. One thing we've noticed is when we were using the M1 chip, we've seen that performance in FileMaker massively go up. So the M1 chip does perform very, very well for FileMaker. Find searches, multi-threaded searches, and so forth work really well. So it's pleased they're doing that. It's just part of Apple's 2-year transition to M1, which I think we're about 14, 15 months in now. So it's looking like Christmas, they would have got rid of Intel completely, so there won't be any. And I think that's what the Studio does. It gets that Mac Pro that used to be an Intel device over to an M1, which is great. So it's all good. The other news I've got is this one thing, and I'm only saying this because I would love to say I read the article, but I've been so busy today and I've been back-to-back meetings. I've not got a chance to prep any news because I normally do a display and show this, but I'm not. There is something I will say though, is if you look on Soliant's blog, which I will quickly share my screen. I think it's that one. Please tell me it's that one. Is it that one? I don't know which one it is. I think it is. Yeah, it's this one. Here we go. So this is the thing they did with a Deadman switch. Monitor FileMaker server with Deadman switch. It's a useful take on how they're doing things. Like, as it says here, the concept of the Deadman switch is you don't have to rely on a process being running on your server to handle reporting errors. It's a useful little tool. I briefly read it. I'd love to tell you more about it. I would love to take the credit that I understood what it was talking about, but I didn't. But it looked very good, and I certainly will be following this one through. But Penny did have a read of it, and it looked really, really positive about ways to monitor your server without a process being running. So it's a cool idea. Most of it seems to be.
Can you put that link in the chat, Gary?
Absolutely, I will do. Yeah. I can work out where the chat's gone. Here we go. Chat for everybody. There you go. So you've got that in there anyway. So it's one of the things I do like about it is the only thing I'm not so sure is it's all doing AWS and CloudWatch. So which seems to be the way they're going, but I'm sure you could move that to be on-prem or some other service that could monitor it. There's got to be a way of doing it, but I'll be honest, have a read the article. It looks interesting. It's a different take on something. So it's something that happened since our last event that looks interesting to me. So right, stop sharing. Other news, I haven't got anything else. The only thing I will say, there's a patch update that I run on my server. Again, one of my servers on my test servers, which caused me a small problem with Windows. And it was to do with IIS issues. I found out WebDirect stopped working on the patch update. And then I found out Microsoft released a patch the next Tuesday. So this happened about 3-4 weeks ago. I'm only mentioning it because you may realize that you've updated your server and you find out IRS stops reporting information. So WebDirect stops working. We spotted it, and then there was a patch update, as I say, with Microsoft that came out. So we always patch on a test server and test some stuff. So we didn't put it in production. We waited a week, did the test again, and Microsoft fixed it. So tip for you guys, if you are updating to the latest version of FileMaker, just check your Windows update is the most up-to-date and not one from 2 or 3 weeks ago, because one from 2 or 3 weeks ago will potentially have an issue for you. I don't think it was isolated to us, it might have been, but we spotted that, and just to give you the heads up. Apart from that, that's it for the news. It's short, sweet, concise, and I do apologise, but I'll be more prepared in the next event. So without ado, I'm going to pass over to Robert, who's next.
Yeah, I think so. Just one quick thing. We like lots of video on the screen, so turn
yes,
your video
please,
on if you're up for it.
If you don't mind showing your face, please do. If you're shy, please don't. You don't have to, but I prefer more videos. Just when I did the recording last time, it was just names on screens. I prefer videos. It looks better. So that's great. Thank you very much, everybody. Superb.
All right. So today I'll be talking about FMHam. It is a tool or a module that has been developed by Charles Delph. So I'm not the author. I'm just a big fan of the tool. Feel free to ask questions during the presentation. Just unmute yourself and fire away. And so what is FMHam? What does it stand for? And all those things? Well, FMHam stands for Headless Authorization Module. Okay, so it is not about authentication. It's not about how you get into the FileMaker file. It's about what you can do once you are inside the file. So yes, it is headless and actually also tailless. So there is no UI that comes with it. If you go and download Charles' package on GitHub. But today I'll be presenting a demo file that I've put together based on his material, because for me it was easier to understand what it can do and cannot do once I built a UI around it. So it uses JSON as a way to store the privileges or the authorizations, and it lets you do things that would not really be possible otherwise with just, I'm going to say, a more conventional approach. For instance, it lets you define groups that will inherit privileges from other groups. Okay, so you have to watch out for circular references, obviously. It also lets you assign privileges to users, so specific users, not a whole group. And it lets you put a given user in multiple groups, okay, at the same time. So on top of that, you can evaluate some expression at runtime for things that are the max, the sum, or even an evaluated statement. So we'll look at that. In terms of requirements, well, FMHam is using the while function, so you need to have at the very least FileMaker 18 to use it. As I said, it uses JSON for the definition of all group privileges, and you need user groups, because without groups you wouldn't be able to do much. So the sample file we're going to be looking at today is based on the starter solution for assets. Why is it I used assets? Well, I did use it because there was one portion that was more like records that we're going to be trying to modify, and there was also already a table for employees, and that was a quick go-to for me to say, well, let's assume that the employees are users. Okay, so if I go over here into the file and look at employees, we have a list of people here. Now, the Venn diagram at the bottom is not dynamic or anything fancy like that. It's just a straight up picture that I put there. But it's meant to represent the kind of complexities that we can face when we are dealing with customer requirements. Okay, so oftentimes when we see Venn diagrams, they're all symmetrical and the overlaps are the same and things like that. But when we're talking about security, it's not rare that we have things where the groups are not equal, and there's people who are in many groups, and there's some groups that do not even overlap in who belongs to them, but also in what feature set they have. So over here, there's just those 5 groups, but there's no less than 14 intersections, I believe. So where even if there's a single letter, I count that as an intersection. So basically, if you want to deploy something that has this kind of map and as your FileMaker security, you would need 14 privilege sets, and that can be a bit overwhelming. So what we're going to look at today is a different approach on that, where you can use HAM to make your overall maintenance of those things simpler. Okay. So in this file, I use the employee detail screen to handle everything about the account and what it can do, but I also use it to define what a group is and what people belonging to a group can do. So there is no dedicated UI for just groups. If you're looking for that in this file, you're not going to see it. And at the end of the presentation, also, I'll be telling everyone how you can reach out to me to get a copy of the file. So basically, what's on the left-hand side is specific to the user only, and what is on the right-hand side is things that we would grant to the whole group. Okay, so in this case, administrators, but there's different groups over here. So, and if I was to change that group, it would make it so my admin account would be in a different group. But if I was to change what's down here, then this is really telling me what it is that every administrator can do in this system. Okay. So the user privileges are, or the account privileges, they are optional. Okay, but if they are defined, then they take precedence over any group that the user belongs to. So we have a main group with its privilege, but as I said, we can define multiple groups for a given user. So I'm going to say, okay, here are other groups that this user belongs to, and I can choose if they are going to be superseding the default group of that user, or if they're going to be superseded by that that user's group. And I can also look over here and say, okay, the administrator group is also inheriting things that are coming from the buyers group and the sales staff group. Okay, so we're going to look at our different records and get familiar with all those things. And in the way that I've defined the privileges, okay, I kind of read them as if at the end of everything, I'm reading them with is allowed, So if I look at employee privilege delete, to me, it's like employee privilege delete is allowed. And more often than not, what you're going to see is something expressed as a 1 or a 0, a true or false. And I do have a 0 over here, but by default, the FMHAM, the module, will output 0, will tell you you're not authorized unless you have the privilege that has been specifically granted to you. So over here, I'm using this because there is the privilege not for admin that exists in the groups that that administrator is inheriting from, and I want to be sure that the admins do not inherit that. So I'm superseding it with the by writing a 0 over here. And you can also store different things in here. Like here, I have an asset price limit, okay, and it's a number. It's straight up a value that I would consider okay given whatever currency you're in, but it's not a 1 or a 0. And you can just store anything you want. We see here on the left-hand side, I have a user preference for a text size or a preference for window dimension. So you can, because the way FMHAM works is it's a set of custom functions that you roll out in your system. You can tap on that anywhere you have access to the to calculations, and so you can pretty much say, okay, well, let's store some more information that is going to be specific to my user in there, and that can come in handy. So for the inheritance, that pattern is really helpful if you have groups that you want to say, okay, here are people who are all into, say, accounting, okay, and we have the junior clerks, the senior clerks, and the accounting lead, and secondary groups or additional groups. They're all optional, but every single user needs to belong to at least one group. You cannot have a user that does not belong to a group. So let's have a quick look at our different staff we have in here. So Julie is going to be our admin. If we go look at Samantha, she's a buyer, and we see here that she has an asset price limit and as a buyer, but we also opted to bump that up in her own profile. So maybe she's a bit more senior. And when we look at Eric, he is part of sales staff, so he's able to edit the asset, but he doesn't have anything to do with asset price limit or things like that. So we'll see what that does a bit later. If we are looking at Jeffrey, he's also in the buyers group, but on his end, we've lowered the actual price limit that he has from the group. And here we have Fred. Fred belongs to a group that is the corporate group. Okay, so we'll look into that a bit later. And the corporate group inherits from East, West, and Central. So this is more of a geographic kind of grouping. And Romeo is simply a dummy user that I'm using when I want to browse the different groups in the file, because as I said, I don't have a dedicated UI for groups only. So I don't want to change my other users accounts and what group they're tied to. So if I want to look for what the different groups can or cannot do, then I come in here and I look at the groups. So with that, let's do some quick tests. Okay, so we're gonna go and log in as Eric. Okay, so I'm coming in here, logging as Eric. right, go into our asset. So over here we have a price field, and it's actually in two places. Okay, so we're gonna do a couple things. So I'll try to add something like this. So over here I have a show custom dialog that is popping up. So that tells us this field has a script trigger. Okay, and it tells me that okay, my profile does not let me change the price, and we're back to the original price. Now, if I come over here and I do the same edit and I click out, now I have another dialog that comes up, but that dialog is not what we have by scripting. You know, there's no show custom that could output something like that. So so what we have here is really a dialog that prompts from FileMaker's field validation. Okay, so over here I'll be reverting the record. I mean, I could say okay, but even if I say okay, my record is not committed. You know, if I click out and try to commit my record, I get prompted with the same dialog. So over here I'll just be reverting the record to this. Okay, so now I just want to quickly change user and go see. We said Jeffrey has a price limit of 1,000. Okay, so I'm going to log in as him, and I'm going to go to our asset record. So we're going to see a behavior that is slightly different. So over here, if again I try to change the price, you know, that's almost in line with what we saw for the new Apple Studio machine. So now we see a message that is different than the message we saw before. It says that the amount exceeds what we are able to set for the asset. And same thing, if I was to do something like this, I'm not able to change the price, you know. But if I change the price for something that falls within my my allowed limits, like this, then it lets me through. Okay. Same thing over here. If I say like this, then the field validation does not do anything. Okay. And now if we do one more thing and go check if we log in with Julie, who's going to be full access, and just to make sure that we are full access, I'm going to bring up the manage database dialog. So here we go, manage database. So we are logged in with an account that is full access. So if I go to my asset and say, I want to change the price. Now, if I come over here and do something like this, it goes through, okay, because it is within my limits. But if I keep bumping things up, okay, at that point, it does give me a message. Again, here we have a script trigger that kicks in. So the trigger fires off regardless. Are we full access or not full access? It doesn't care about that. So that's a good thing. And same thing over here. If I stay within my limits, again, we don't have anything coming up. But if I add something that really is outside what is allowed, here we have the dialog that comes up again, even if I'm full access, because this is validation, and validations will apply to everyone, regardless if you're full access or if you are another user using a different privilege set. Okay, So I'll just be reverting that. And now if we go and log in as Fred Johnson, okay, who belonging to the corporate group, he doesn't even have anything that lets him edit the asset. Okay, so if I log in as Fred and go to our asset, not too sure why my machine is lagging here. Sorry about that. So in the asset record, this time around, if I want to edit something different than the price, if I want to edit the serial number, for instance, okay, I can go into the field, and if I start typing, as I type, I'm going to be getting this prompt. Now, this prompt is not a show custom dialog, and it's not a validation. This is really FileMaker security that is telling me, hey, you're not allowed to do this. Okay. So now let's go and have a look at how this is all set up under the hood. So I'm just going to, again, relog in with our admin account. So basically, if we look at our scripting, so in the trigger that runs when we are editing the field for the price is simply calling the ham check privilege custom function, okay, and it's asking, okay, what is it you're checking against? So I'm giving my privilege, and then you get pass or fail basically out of that, okay. So what you choose to do from there on has that per se has nothing to do with FMHam. You know, that's up to you to decide what you want to implement once the FMHam has told you, okay, this is user, this user is allowed to do this, or this user is not allowed to do that. Okay, but in this case, what we're doing is we're checking to make sure that the user can edit the price, and we're checking that the user is setting the price to a value that is within the price limit. Okay, so that's as simple as that. Now, if we look at, we said there's something that takes place at the level of field validations. Okay, so our field validation is not all that different from what we saw. If we look at the price over here, we have our validation, and it's validated by calculation. Okay, and some people tell me, well, validation is not really security, it's more like data integrity. And I, in all honesty, I totally agree with that. But for all intent and purposes, over here, it's letting us achieve what we want to do. So in that context, I feel like there's no real value in trying to distinguish those two from one another. So our calculation over here is, again, just checking that the price is lower than the asset price limit, and that the user is able to edit the asset price. Okay, that's that. Now, we also saw there is a user in here that did not have any rights to edit the whole asset record. Okay, and how is that enforced? Well, what we're looking at over here is we have in all our tables, I chose to name those fields like record edit is allowed, but you can name it however you want. And it's basically just an unstored calculation that is returning, hey, can my user do this or not? And the thing I'm checking for is asset edit and asset delete. Okay. And I'm using this unstored calculation in the security dialogues. So if we go in our setup over here, what we have is, of course, the admin user is going to be belonging to the full access privilege set. And if we look at all of our other users, they're tied to a privilege set that is called everyone, okay, because, well, everyone else is in there. So if we go look at that privilege set for everyone, what kind of customization do we have in here? So we have something where for the records, we've been limiting access to edit and delete into all their tables. And if we look at the calculation over here, the calculation is fairly simple. It simply checks for that one field, record edit is allowed. Okay, and because that field exists in all the other tables, I can just copy that value and paste it over into all the other dialogues over here and keep going, copy paste, copy paste, copy paste, and then be done. Same thing with the deletions. You know, it's just the deletion is obviously going to be looking at my other calculation, but other than that, it's a fairly simple setup, and then you can dismiss this and never come back in here, because to my taste, it's just there's a lot of nested dialogues, one on top of the other, and it's a bit difficult to figure out what you want to know about a solution, especially when you have multiple privilege sets. So over here we have something where we can have a single privilege set and do everything that we need to do. Obviously, there's other places where I'd like to use this. I'd like to use this for creation, but creation does not let us define a calculation. And field access also, if you choose limited, well, instead of getting a calculation, what you get is another dialog where for each field, you can pretty much hard code, oh, can the user modify the field, has only view-only access, or has no access. So this is not something where calculation play well. You can totally use that in combination with what you have coming from FMHAM, but I'm not going to use FMHAM in this context. And now for view access privileges, you can define a calculation there. It's just, I don't think there's a way for FileMaker to store any of that, even when you're relying on fields that are locally stored to the record. So I often will shy away from enforcing view level access on the record level access. But if you want to implement that, you still can. Just know that it may not perform very well depending on what you apply it to. So so we've seen a bunch of different things. I'm just curious if there are any questions before we look at some other things that FMHAM has packaged for us.
Yeah, Robert, can you could you have used the custom function directly in the privilege set, rather than
Absolutely
in the record?
Absolutely, you totally can do that. Yes. My preference is to rely on the unstored calculation, because accessing the defined database and going and customizing the field is much easier than going and customizing the calculation in the security dialogues. But you totally, if you don't like that approach, you can totally use the FMHAM's custom function in in the security dialogues themselves.
Okay, great, thanks.
Is there also something from Benedict, perhaps?
No, sorry, I just might have clicked on, but it's great. Yeah, it's really interesting, Robert. Thank you.
All good.
Are you going to do like scripts, using it for scripts, running scripts stuff?
You can use it everywhere you have access to the calculation. So if you want to use it for even like on your layouts to say, oh, I'm going to use it to in some hide conditions, for layout objects, you can put it there. If you want to use it inside of a script, like I use it inside of a script that was triggered, but it could totally be a script that does not rely on a trigger. So it's really up to you where you want to use it. It's very flexible because calculations is something we have access to in a lot of places in FileMaker. So that is really rich in terms of possibilities.
Yeah, I've set up a little system for doing, because I need to do this kind of thing where I work. It's quite complicated who can do what when, and the groups don't do it. But it's I'm sure Charles's, I'm going to take a look because it'll be much more sophisticated. Mine's just quite simple and works, but it's really interesting. Thank you.
Awesome. So I want to spend some time to discuss what I've said earlier about the possibility to have some max and even eval take place in this. So there's a lot of scenarios where group inheritance alone will let us achieve a good part of what we want to do. Okay, but there are some scenarios where we need more than just inheritance, because it's not as straightforward. It's not just, okay, I have these users and they're on my, if you have, say, a vertical with a light, a premium, and an enterprise plan, or whatever you want to call them, bronze, silver, and gold. So that usually is pretty straightforward. But like I said, when we're coming into groups where the pattern is a bit different, if we look at thread and we say that, okay, the corporate really inherits from 3 different groups, and east, west, and central, there's no relationship. It's not like east is more junior than west, and so on and so on. So
Robert, can I ask a quick question there?
Yes.
In the scenario just described, how would it deal with if you had conflicting privileges within what you're inheriting from?
Yes. So if there are conflicts, the order that you list them in will matter. Okay.
Right.
So basically, the latest one in the sequence wins.
Okay.
So
cool.
the same way, like if we go and see Samantha, like she's in the buyers group, we have things that are here. There's sales staff, there are things that are here, and we know that admins will inherit both sales staff and buyers. Okay, but if in between those two there was some conflicts, then in the order that we ask for this inheritance to be resolved, then the latest one would win over the previous ones.
Okay, thanks.
So and that is kind of what we want to fight off with the example of Fred, because east, west, and central, they are very not linear, So here we're going to look at them on purpose. I've designed them to have keys that would normally conflict or overlap. Okay, so over here we have an asset price limit. Okay, and there's a suffix of max and suffix of sum and suffix of max again. So asset price limit, other stuff, and other thing. Okay, and in central they're all defined to 1. If I go to East, we have an asset price limit of 1,000, and then some other stuff set to 2, and other thing set to 13. And if I go to West, okay, an asset price limit of 100, other stuff that is set to 3, and other thing that is set to 1,000. Okay, so based on that, I have 1,000 here. I have 1,000 in the East for the asset price limit. So no matter how I stack those in terms of inheritance, it's impossible for me to have my corporate group to say, okay, well, take 1,000 from East and take 1,000 from West, and then just give me that, because if I put West as the last group, then by inheritance, it's going to say, no, 100 wins over your 1,000. And if I flip them around, it's the same thing. My 1,000 here is going to be losing over whatever is defined in the East group. Okay, so that's why we are defining them over here with the suffix that says, okay, we want the max or the sum for those. And with that, it lets us or it lets FMHAM resolve the thing as a whole. Okay, so I'm going to go into Fred's account. I'm going to log in, and I'm going to bring up the data viewer to see what we have in terms of logging in. It's going to be the first time that you see the kind of outputs that we get from FMHAM. So if I log in as Fred, and if I bring up my data viewer, and let's unlock this, let's say I'm in, and it looks like I kind of lost my variable. So over here we have ham config, and we have $flat. So $flat is a courtesy variable that we get from the initialization script. Okay, so you can totally knock that off. And ham config is where ham is storing a config, basically. Okay, so if I look at what I have here in flat, okay, if I double click, so we see that, okay, asset price limit is set to 1,000. Okay, other stuff comes out to 6 because it was defined with a sum, and we had values of 1, 2, and 3. So 1, 2, and 3 summed up together equates to 6. And other thing resolves to 1,000. Okay, so, and something else that I want to point to is over here we have rolling credits underscore eval. Okay, and over here we have a string that we can totally eval and get a count for. Okay, so if I was to ask FileMaker to say, give me a check privilege on the credits, okay, then it would output to me check priv. So if I check for this like that, auto entry just, so it tells me, okay, 800 because we're the 8th day of the month and it was defined this way. So today it's going to say 800, tomorrow it's going to say 900, and so on and so on. So there's a lot of things that you can do with this type of configuration. Okay, so we saw that the inheritance, I'm just going to flush a bunch of the things I have over here. So we saw that the inheritance can be bypassed if you want to say, hey, just give me the max or the sum of those values. So that can be really helpful for situations where you have this one group that oversees activities in many other groups, and those groups, it's not like they're in a linear definition of one. The same key is always being increased as you level up, if I may say. But with evaluation, you can do pretty much anything you can think of, and that is, for instance, if you want to say, hey, I want him to be able to run this report, but only on Mondays and Wednesdays and Fridays, but not Tuesdays and not Thursdays, then if you can think of a calculation, FMHAM is going to evaluate it for you, okay? And just to just talk a little bit about what we have over here, if you don't like that there are things that FMHAM stores as a global variable, you can totally tweak it for it to rely on things that would be in a global field for security purposes, a field that you could control and make sure that it doesn't get edited by anyone. Something else that you can do with FMHAM, when we saw that I made the call over here, there's a second parameter that you can send in to provide some options, and one of those options is an encryption key. So for a demo, it doesn't really make sense for me to want to encrypt what's on screen, because then it wouldn't be making much sense to be looking at it, you know. But if you want to do that, then you're able to encrypt the contents. So of course you have to send in your key for every single call, and if you have a very large JSON object, like decrypting it could potentially translate to a performance hit or something like that. But all in all, there are things you can do if you don't quite like the fact that for portability reason, the way it was designed was that you could just take this and deploy it without having to rely on existing data structures. Okay. So, and also another option that I didn't talk about was, we saw that when I've looked at this here, what I get is the string, but upon initialization, there is also an option that will say, okay, do you want it to be evaluated every time you call the function, in which case it's going to store the string, or do you want it to be evaluated only at initialization? And if so, then what we would see over here would be the straight value. We would see just 800, you know, and no matter what you would do after that, it would not get reevaluated. Okay, so depending on what you want to do, you may want to opt for one option or the other. So so we've looked at the asset price, other stuff, other thing, the max, the sum. We've seen that, and we've seen evaluate. Okay, and one thing that is important to know is when you are relying on those suffix, the suffix you use them when you define the privilege, but when you call the privilege using the custom function, you don't want to use the suffix, because it may very well be that you even have like a set rolling credits over here to a given value, and if it was to take precedence over something else, you'd want to just designate it by what it is, not use it with the suffix. Okay, so let's talk just a little bit about users with multiple groups. So having users who can belong into multiple groups is really awesome, especially when inheritance doesn't get you there. So we saw the Venn diagram with plenty of overlaps. People can have many different hats, So sometimes you're not going to say, okay, this group is inheriting all of that other group. You don't want that, but you want this one user to be kind of wearing both hats, okay, for whatever reason that may be. And so that can be a lifesaver, say when someone goes on vacation, you know, instead of saying, okay, I need to create a new group or merge the groups or anything like that. You simply look at, okay, who's going on vacation, what groups was he in, and then you add those groups to the user who's doing the replacement. It could even let you say, hey, you know what? There's going to be 3 person who's going to be filling in for the duties of that one person going on vacation, and they're each going to have a portion of the groups. If that person is in 3 groups, you could say, okay, I'll give that one group to John. I'll give that one group to Susie, and I'll give that one group to Mark. So it's really flexible. So, and if we are thinking of people going on vacation, if I take the example, and I think I need to relog in as my admin if I want to be able to make edits to my users. But basically, if we take the example of a school, okay, and we go with something that is completely far-fetched, but let's say we have the school principal and the janitor, okay, and they both go on vacation one after the other, and they both backfill the other person. So over here, you could come in and say, okay, I'm the principal, okay, I'm going to be filling in for the janitor. So I want my role of a principal to be superseding the role of a janitor, okay? So I would say, okay, over here, let's come in and say something like that, okay? Now the other way around, if I'm the janitor and I'm taking on the duties of the principal, I want the principal's duties to supersede my own group. So I would come over here and write the principal groups over here to make sure that if there are any conflicts between the groups, then the definition of the user for principal would win over my own janitor privileges. Okay, so that's an important distinction to say, okay, I'm going to add this to this group or to that group, and what supersedes what. Okay, and if there are no conflicts, then you're for any entry or any privilege where there are no conflicts, the result is simply that you get the merge of every privilege altogether for that one user. So now it's also very nice to use if you have a vertical, okay, and you are selling packages that may be, you know, when we said, okay, you have your plans for bronze, silver, and gold, but maybe there is something else that you sell on top of that. Let it be sending SMS messages or anything else that you can think of. Okay, well, if we look at Eric, okay, Eric has special bundle ABC, and we've assigned him to this group 3 times. Okay, so let's go have a quick look at what's in that group. So special bundle ABC has the bundle thing _ sum, and it says 25. So if I go look at Eric, and if I log in as him, then we're going to see, bringing up the data viewer. So bundle thing comes out to 75 because that's 25 times 3, and it adds them up. Okay, so that can be very, very helpful if you are using a vertical or something like that. We also saw that in the groups that I've defined, everyone I've assigned to the group called disabled features. Okay, so you could do something like that if you choose to do that. And I'm just gonna again relog in as my admin account and go see the group for disabled features. Okay, so if we look at what we have in disabled features, well, in there you could say, okay, I'm working on this one feature. It's some more stuff. Okay, so I'm setting it to 0. Okay, so for everyone, it's going to be disabled. And then as a developer, I could come over here and assign myself more stuff and set it to 1. You know, if I want to ask a given user to test that feature, I can go to that user, or I can have a group of testers and go to that group and say, okay, well, this group of tester, I'm going to add it to their users, and I'm going to see that it supersedes the disabled features, and so on and so on. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. You can even come up with something where if you want to roll out something to everyone in the system at the same time, you could come up here with a calculation. I'm evaluating the host timestamp. Okay, is it going to be to, well, January 1st of 2100? That's a bit far out, but you could come up with a date that's a bit closer, and say, okay, on Monday, April 7th at 9 a.m., you know, I want this to go live. And as soon as this will evaluate to 1 or to true for everyone in the system, then it's gonna come live. So, and at that point, maybe the name of the group disabled feature is no longer a good name, because quite literally, because this group has been assigned to all users and it supersedes their own group, then if it says 1, then for everyone, it's going to be valid. So you'd want to think about how you are using it, but there are those things that you deploy to everyone. So, and as you are developing on your features, you can go into the groups and say, okay, I want to add this in, you know, and set it to 1 in the group, set it to give the privilege. It's going to remain disabled up until you say, okay, now I want it to go live and more stuff. Let's remove it from the disabled feature. And when you delete it from here, then it comes live in exactly just the groups where you wanted to grant it, you know. So there's really a lot of things that we can use FMHAM for. I think the flexibility makes it look like it would be for like large deployments, but even if you have a very small solution, you can deploy that and rely on it to scale well if you want to use it. So I just want to look quickly at the custom functions and the scripting that we have to say, okay, well, if I want to roll this out in my system, what do I need? So if we go over here, first I want to give credit where credit is due. So huge thanks to Charles Delph and contributors for making FMHAM in the first place. There's also a custom function from Steve SSH that I use to customize FMHAM for it to handle the dot notation in JSON, because the native or vanilla implementation from Charles Delph will not support JSON objects that are nested with the dots in the keys. It only supports things that are at the first level. And so yeah, looking at what it is we need. So if we look quickly at the custom functions, So in here we have 3 functions, one for config, one for check privilege, and then the utility. Flatten JSON object is the custom function from Steve SSH that I use to customize FMHAM. And FMList to JSON array is really not part of FMHAM. I'm simply using it where we see things in FileMaker that are defined as carriage return delimited list. I'm using that to change them to a JSON array, because FMHAM is going to use arrays and not carriage return delimited list. So, and when we are looking at what we get over here, so on first window open, I need to get like all of the existing privileges and give that to FMHAM. Okay, so and that lives in my case in a global field, and that global field is global's ham all authorization groups. So we can look at that quickly. If I bring up the data viewer and say, let's look at what we have in there. So it's just a big JSON of all the groups and everything they're allowed to do. Okay, so administrators can do this, and that. They inherit from buyers and sales staff. And so what is that buyers can do? Buyers can do this. And so FMHAM needs you to give it the list of all the groups privileges, because otherwise there's no way that it can enforce inheritance. If you say, okay, I'm an admin, you know, do your thing, but then admin needs to inherit from sales, and you're not giving it what sales can do, then it's gonna hit a wall, you know. So that's why you need to send in everything. So at startup, I'm initializing that that variable, and then basically ham run setup is what you run when you want to initialize for a given user. So we're fetching information about what are the user privileges that are exclusive to that one user, not to the group. Okay, and then we are checking, okay, tell me what group I'm in. Is it only one group, or is it a list of groups? And from there, we run the ham config, you know, and ham config is just expecting very few things. So it's asking for all of the JSON definition for all the groups. It's asking us for who's our user. So what group does it belong to? Is it a single group or multiple groups? And what are the user authorizations, what FMHAM calls overrides, okay? And over here, you have your options. Again, like I said, if you want things to be encrypted, if you want evaluations to happen only at runtime or at initialization, then you can use the options to do those things, okay? So that's it. And over here, like I'm setting flat because for demo purposes, it's nice to look at the output with JSON formatted, but you can totally get rid of that. And as I said, if you don't like to have something in your system that relies on global variables, then you can look at the custom functions and just say, okay, let's get in there every reference to $ham config, and then change that for your global field of choice, and then you need the script over here to take the result of that and put that in your global field once the setup ran. So I think that's a wrap. If there's any questions or comments. Oh, and I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, if you want to get a copy of this file, so you can simply go to my website. That's accolade+accolade.com, and on the homepage, you just, oh, sorry about that. You just click let's talk, and then fill out the form and say, hey, Robert, would like to get a copy of the FMHAM, and once I get this, I should be replying to you and sending that over to you by email fairly quickly.
Can you put that link in the chat, please, Robert?
Absolutely, I'll do that.
Great. Well, that's pretty interesting.
Questions?
Does it put much overhead on a file in terms of performance, do you think, especially if you're scaling up to a large number of users?
I've been working with a huge project where we have
depends what for.
We have more than 500 users, and whenever you use calculations within the privilege sets, I can see that it's a huge impact on performance. So especially if you're using on stored calculations like you're doing right now, Robert. But I assume you've tested it out and have some good feedback for that.
Yeah, well, like I said, really, so couple things. We're talking about a number of users, and then we're talking about unstored calculations and how you're using it in fields. Okay, and again, FMHAM, like this is one implementation. You can choose how you roll it out. You don't have to do it the way that I've done so in this file. So, but basically, if you have 1,000 users, all that FMHAM needs is to say, hey, how many groups do you have, and what are the privileges for all those groups? It doesn't care that you have 7,000 users, okay? And for the one user that you want to log in as, you need to tell him like, hey, here are here is what I get to do with my one user. You know, I get to do new stuff, and I get to have a user pref for text size that is 24, okay? So from there, it takes that, and it runs its thing to store, okay, what's the JSON that tells me what I can and cannot do? And it keeps that in its back pocket. And from every time you call the custom function for check privilege, again, like I said, if you have to decrypt the content of where you stored your JSON object, it can impact you. But if it is in a secured global field, and you're okay with reading it, then it doesn't mean that you have to encrypt it. So from there, you'd be able to just get that, and it's pretty simple. You know, it's a list of keys, and it's retrieving the value for a given address. So I don't think you'd be having like trouble with performance on that end. Now, if we're talking about things that involve record level access, okay, now that's a different thing. So for anything that just concerns a single record, there shouldn't be any problems, okay, because FileMaker is going to evaluate that, and you're going to be good. It's nothing to evaluate for one record, okay. Can you edit? Yes or no. Can you delete? Yes or no, and that's it, okay. But if you are running anything that will touch multiple records, you know, so if you do replace field contents, if you are importing and updating an existing found set, if you are deleting all records in your found set and things like that, then yes, FileMaker has to figure out for each and every single record, like, is this something that you're allowed or not allowed to do? And then at that point, it has nothing to do with FMHAM or not ham. It just has to do with what you are relying on to enforce those things, you know. And if we look at the calculation dialogues for security, there's no storage options in there, okay. So I don't think FileMaker will be storing anything to say, okay, this is gonna work faster. Someone who wants to go there can totally make the test and say, okay, I've tested with this, and this is faster than that. and for that many records and for that many records. So you can benchmark if you want, but I've used this and it works. So you can use it as well. But like anything, I'm not saying use it blindly. There can be things that you would be running into that will give you trouble, but that's with anything. It doesn't pertain to FMHAM per se. If you were to rid yourself of FMHAM and enforce the same security in some other fashion, chances are you'd be running against the same performance hits. Is that answering your questions?
Yes, that's very helpful. I had another question that was, how easy would it be to retrofit it to a solution?
Fitting can be easy. It really depends on what you already have in place. Okay. So speaking for myself, in doing a retrofit where I was relying on extended privileges, that had been customized. So I already had a bunch of keys. So I was checking for this. All I had to do was customize the custom function I already had to say, well, no longer look for the extended privileges, just go look at what is stored in FMHAM, So that was a breeze. But if you have a security setup where in your calculations and in your scripts, you're checking for account names or user privilege set names, then there's no easy conversion going from there. Like FMHAM cannot figure out, you're telling me you're in this group. It doesn't know what group you're in. It just knows, here is what you can do based on who you told me you belonged in, So but there's nothing that prevents it. You don't need to be all in. You could roll out FMHAM for like newer components that you want to rely on, and your existing calculations are still going to work. And over time you can work them into, let's put that in FMHAM and not test for this one more username or this one more privilege set or so on and so on.
Okay, well, that's great. Thank you, Robert. Has anyone else got questions?
Maybe my naivety, Robert, but I was looking at it thinking the one thing you can't do is, so you have a single admin account in the file, and then every user is in everyone, and then basically FMHAM just controls every level of access from there, really. My concern is, could FMHAM technically give a user admin rights?
FMHAM is not authentication.
Yeah.
Okay. So if by admin rights you mean full access.
Yeah.
So the only thing that gives you full access is FileMaker login.
That's what I thought. Yeah,
it's the authentication. So this is not about like, how do you log in? Who are you and those things. It's saying, okay, you're logged in and you're telling me that you're part of this group or that group. So I'm based on that, I'm going to tell you what you can and cannot do.
Yeah.
But it's not going to give you any super user type of abilities. I mean, unless you go in and code things that would script for go to define database and those kind of things, but that's really that's far off from what I believe was your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, fine. I just wanted to check the security level of it, and what users could get access to from a point of view of use, and where they could go. But it looks like that would control. I'm interested in it. It's an intriguing idea. And what you're saying about modules as well, it could be something useful where, coming back to Jul's question of how you deploy this, I can certainly see that, yeah, if you're building a new module, you can say, right, that new module can then run with this technology and have that running. It's totally independent of what your existing solution is actually doing. So I think it's neat. It's a neat idea. It's quite cool.
Yeah, and I can't take any credit for that. That's the design that comes from from Charles. So
Yeah, but it's nice
Yeah.
to know that you're using it in different situations and finding it works, and that's good.
Yeah, and because I've been looking at this, and basically what sold me was the ability to have inheritance, and then I started digging in, and I was like, oh, wait a second, there's this one more feature, and there's this one more feature, and you can do this, oh, you can do that, so I was like a kid looking at all the things that are packaged in there, and oftentimes it's just from the file that that Charles publishes on his GitHub. It's not an easy conclusion to be like, oh yeah, it does this and it does that. To me, I was like, okay, I see the building blocks, but if I use the Lego analogy, even if I see a pile of blocks, I can recognize that there's great potential there, but I still needed something that tell me, oh, I can use it for this and I can use it for that. So the demo file here is really my attempt on just like showing a build kit, and it doesn't mean that you have to use it the way that it's in this demo file. It's just to spark ideas and be like, okay, well, yes, now I see where you can get to with this kit, so for my own implementation, I'll swap this out and I'll put this in instead, and so on and so on. So but I think the Lego kit is really just to let people have more of an image, that they can relate and say, oh yeah, I've got this in my system. I know I've got this customer who always calls on me when someone is going on vacation, or this customer who always calls on me and says, I've got a new hire, he's not quite sales, he's not quite accounting, he's going to be doing a bit of both. Can you do something for me? And then you scratch your head and you're like, well, am I really going to create a whole new privilege set for just one user? So FMM can let you answer all of that. So
yeah,
there's one thing you probably want to be just thinking. The one danger I could see is if you've got a solution that's exposed the calculation engine anywhere to the user, sort of either in evaluate or replace or anything like that, where someone would be able to poke at the configuration custom functions.
Absolutely. If someone can inject something in there, it's game over.
Yeah.
So, but like by itself, anything where someone has access to the calculation engine,
it's a bad idea anyway.
It's a bad idea right there. So
yeah.
In here we see that there are things that will evaluate, but I'm not saying go and give access to everyone to to stuff like this. I made a UI. It doesn't mean all of your users should access this, so they can go and customize it. And if you pile on like someone who'd say, okay, I'll do this, but I'll deploy my own plugin alongside, and now that I have access to the calculation engine, I'll call on this plugin, and then there's really a bunch of things that are opened up. But so, and again, that stands true regardless of what you use FMHAM for. Certainly. So it's really, again, I would love, say, for extended privileges to be a big JSON, that I would store stuff there and be like, well, no one's going to be able to edit that, even if they are coming from this or this angle, and if I change it, it's going to be live for everyone. But it's not the way it works. So to me, I have to weigh, okay, what are the good things I get from this design, and what are the good things I get from this other design, and where do I stand? And my call on that was like, well, I'm going to go away from extended privileges and I'm going to go towards HAM. But again, it's security. So I'm not saying there's only one way and it's FMHAM, you know, do security the way that suits you. I'm just saying, if you faced some challenges that seemed like they didn't have a solution before, perhaps FMHAM is worth looking into. Perhaps FMHAM is the solution to your thing. Is it bringing something else in the mix that you don't like? That's for you to. I can't make that judgment call for anyone else.
Next up on my agenda is just a brief update on the text-to-speech proof of concept. I don't know if who was here last time, I can't quite remember, but basically I was asked by one of my customers to enable iPads to speak custom text whilst driving around a warehouse, so that they could be told what to pick next, essentially. So I'm going to share my screen. Has it gone down here? Let me just find it. Share screen. Share screen. Where has it gone? There we go. This is the window I want to share. Just ignore that one for the minute. Turn that off. Get rid of that one too. Right, so can you see that screen, everybody?
Yep.
So basically, what it does is when you go onto a screen here, it has got some custom text. If I just take word out, it should fire off.
Why not pick 21 packs of big fat FMBug widgets from the top shelf on the right?
So this is on the desktop and it's running, and it's just concatenating a load of fields into one field there. That's just for show. You don't actually need the web viewer on there. Got a bit slow. Right, okay. So if I just change that to 20.
Why not pick 20 packs of big fat FMBug widgets from the top shelf on the right?
And this, I assure you, works on the iPad. We can change various settings on it. It's extremely simple. It was just tedious to get it to work on the iPad because there were a few issues. Let me just show you the web viewer. Nothing. Nice and easy. Doesn't look like there's anything in there. But what there is where did I have that? Probably easiest to show you Ian's version, but before I do that, this is where it came from. So this is on Mozilla. There's a this is using the speak function built into HTML5. So this is the demo that was the original file. And again, if you look at that, there's actually nothing in there. But what that is sorry, no, that was just a link to the file. Sorry, my bad. This one. So this is basically, that's the content of the web viewer. So it's using the speech synthesis function in HTML5. It's called an API for some reason. So the code is pretty simple. And in fact, if you look at Ian's version, it's even simpler.
with some text to speak. What shall I say? Is that enough?
I'll put this up on my, well, it is up on my server, and I'll put a link in the chat if anyone wants to look at it at their leisure and leave it up for a short while. So you can all have a look at it. It's completely unlocked. I'll put the login and the pass in the chat in a minute. But what I did come across really is that
Why not pick 20 packs of big fat FMBug widgets from the top shelf on the right?
is the, can you see the script workspace here?
Yeah.
Good. The thing I did find that caused a problem was was calling it too quickly. So this is the script that's a script trigger on the actual layout. And I found that there's a pause, that you need a pause to allow the web viewer to load if you're going to run it automatically. And that pause value can be minimum half a second, but more like 3/4 of a second on an iPad, half a second on a desktop machine. That seemed to solve the issue. I don't know if you've got any comments about that, Ian. I don't know if you had a look at any of that.
Well, I would usually make a loop and then wait till the thing shows up in the HTML.
Yeah, that would be another way of doing it, Christian.
Yeah, actually, I didn't load it automatically. So what I did was I loaded the HTML, but then when I called the speak function, I called that by script. So that would have been after the HTML had loaded. So that's.
Yeah, I still had a problem. It still.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah, I still seemed to think it still wanted to take a bit more time.
I would do the loop idea that Christian said. You can loop for the close of the HTML code. So when you see the close in the HTML code, therefore you know it's loaded.
Yeah.
So that's one way of doing it. Or we had the same thing with scanning barcodes on iPads. Worked fine on desktop. This is the thing, and I know you got this working on desktop straight away. Jul.
Yeah.
We had
I could do all sorts of things on the desktop.
Absolutely, desktop just always works. We had the same thing with scanning barcodes. It worked seamlessly on a Mac with a scanner attached. Put it on an iPad. We had to put pauses in, refresh of records, commits. I mean, it was a totally different environment for some reason. I don't know why. We had the same thing. We had a pause, I think, of about 1/4 of a second. We put in one of ours for our scans into a global. We just put it exactly the same as you've done. Detect the version that's running. If it's iOS, whack the pause in, it then fixed it. But I agree with what Christian said. If you've got stuff to load in a web viewer, just create a loop and just capture for the close of your HTML. Because if you could see that in there, you know it's loaded to the HTML and you can fire what you need to do after.
Yeah, good idea. Anyway, I'll stick that up and I'll stick the link up in the chat. So if anyone wants to check out it works and look at it and pick it to pieces, go ahead. Don't screw it up. You'll have full admin pages, full admin rights on it.
The only other thing I'll just add is that if you just go back to my example, the HTML code, that what I've got in there, you can see there's a few events being fired. So when you get like the utter on boundary equals function event, so it's kind of triggering, it's doing the console log when various events happen. So that just kind of illustrates some of the events that fire within the web viewer. So you could actually take those parts out and it will work perfectly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Yes, I literally took your code and didn't do much to it. But yeah, I made 1 or 2 little changes and I made some variables that could be replaced so you could set them by hand, like the rate and the volume. What I did have a bit more trouble with was setting, I haven't really had time to look at it anymore because it's not a requirement, is to change the voice. Have you had any luck? Have you looked at that at all in any other situation?
Didn't really try, but I think there's, I think you can query the available voices.
Yes, I can. I can get them to load into a selector, so they're there, and it gives you a list of all the voices. I didn't actually I found picking them quite hard, other than in the web viewer. I mean, that was fine. I mean, you can always do that, but loading it from a FileMaker field seems to be harder.
Might want to pass that in as a parameter into the function, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. Or maybe you could do it in the second web viewer, just as the selector for the voice. It's another way of doing it, I guess. So yeah, anyone any questions? Anyone would find this useful?
Yeah, definitely. You know, I would.
No, well, I know you would, Gary.
Yeah. I've got a warehouse with 100 people in it now, so moving to text picking or voice picking would be the way to go. Ideally, it is substantially quicker from all the tests that I've looked at in the past, but I've never been able to master how to do it, to be honest. So if this nails it, thank you to both of you and Ian for this. It might change how we do picking in the warehouse. So.
Okay. Okay, I will I'll post the link in the chat, as I say, in a moment, and over to you, Gary.
I have one quick question. Is there a version of iOS FileMaker it will run on? Does it have to be 19? Will it work on 18?
Haven't tested it.
Fine.
I can't see any reason why it wouldn't work on yeah. The web viewer was updated, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's the reason why I was asking, because we've got some older iPads in there, and we're looking to refresh all the kit anyhow in the warehouse, but we've got some older iPads at the moment that are running 18. So
well, I guess in the next week or two, probably doing more tests. So
sure.
I will get back to you, let you know.
Yeah, let me know. That'd be good. Cool. Nice. Well done, Jul.
Okay. I will stop sharing. Whenever I stop sharing, it's up there.
Jul or Ian, is there any way we can get our hands on that example file or something equal to that?
Yeah. I mean, I'll put it up in the thing, but if just email me and I'll give it to you. I'll put it up on the FMBug site somewhere. If you want the example file, I'll do that afterwards. But in the meantime, if you want to have a play with it, I'll give you a link and when I find it, and and let it go from there.
I'll just share the link to the documentation in the chat now as well.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, there was, I don't know if you saw, there's a big button on the bottom that said links. There's some useful links on there for resources.
This is a presentation I've done a couple of times now, and obviously Heidi and Chris started this with stuff they did for Paul's, so I then adapted it very, very slightly for Johan and presented it to him. I thought it's at the point now where I'm more comfortable that it can probably go out more to the community and everything, and go worldwide and go where it needs to be. So this is a process of tasks and things to do in the event of a breach happening on your system. So it's not to say it's a FileMaker related thing only. It's the point there's a breach on the server that's hosting your FileMaker solution, and it's giving you an idea and an insight of what can be issues and fallout and processes that you might have to jump through. If you run a FileMaker server and you host a solution for anyone, whether you're doing it virtually, on-prem, whatever, I hope there's some stuff in here that you can take away and go, okay, that's something I should put in place. I must start this with the fact that this is advisory. Don't quote me on this and say I followed your thing and I was not immune. It's up to you to do your own security on your systems, I might add, but it gives you an insight to some of the areas. So who am I? You will probably know me anyhow, but there you go. That's what I've been doing. I'm not going over that again. So security vectors that can impact you. So we all know what happens. Any threat actor out there is then going to be looking at ways into your system. There are various ways they can get in. It usually 99% of the time starts with phishing email, and the squidgy person at the end of the mouse is the problem. It's normally not the IT, it's not the security teams, it's not those that have caused the problems. Occasionally there are mishaps that happen, but 99% of the time it's the user, it's you guys clicking things you shouldn't do. It's clicking a link that comes in your email that you shouldn't have done. And as a byproduct of that, you then move into malware. What does malware do? It moves into something that is then grabbing data from your systems. It gives you an access point. It could lead to ransomware. It could lead to various aspects of threats on your system and security holes. Why do people do this? The only reason why they do it is ideally to get to ransomware, which is the ideal, the ultimate aim that most people do is to go to ransomware, and they would then want to get paid to then unlock your systems. The other ones they do it is they are then causing denial of service attacks. The latest thing at the moment, because ransomware is sort of going away to a certain degree because of changes in legislation in the US, that is now against the law, supposedly, to even pay the ransomware. So it's great for all those people in the US that then get stuck. Their only way out is to pay the ransomware. They pay the ransomware and then they get fined by the government for paying the ransomware. The double whammy. So that's not good. So as a byproduct of that, why do they do it? The latest trend is a botnet. They're trying to put code on machines that they can invoke and then have tens of thousands of machines to hit things and cause disruption. It seems to be their way. And that's the latest one they did with the telecoms companies. So they created this tens of hundreds of thousands of machines botnet, hit the telecoms companies, which then brought down a VoIP network system, which crucified everyone's phone systems in the point of a pandemic where everyone's doing VoIP phone systems. They all went down and they said, if you pay us, we won't disrupt you again. So instead of doing ransomware and blocking it, they just called a denial of service attack. Some terminology I want to just highlight at the bottom of that. Everything comes into your systems. So you're hosting your FileMaker service. It doesn't matter where you're hosting it, whether it's AWS, Claris Cloud, on-prem, really doesn't matter. There is a way in, and that's called north-south. And the north-south is basically internet traffic into your network. That's the only way they can get in, unless you've got a threat actor on your network, which is a lot worse because then they're already in. So they already can get onto your systems. And why do they come in? They come in only to go east to west. They want to go laterally move across your network to find something. So they may come in via a user's machine for a phishing attack, get onto that end user's machine, then they go east to west to try and find your infrastructure and your servers. So to give you an idea of what this happens, I thought I'd play a little scenario here. We have your end user, which is Peter. You have your IT tech guy, which is Vision, and your threat actor, that is Ultron. It gives you an idea of where we're going with this. What happens is Ultron sends an email to Peter. Peter interacts with it. His machine gets compromised. That compromise then allows Ultron onto the machine. He will then lateral move onto a server and then escalate his privileges up through your whole company, and then he's got access to everything. That is what we're trying to stop. But as I said at the opening thing, we're not here to discuss the network security. If that's been breached, what impact does that do to your files? Because that's the end result. Everything's going to be compromised. It doesn't matter if it's your FileMaker server, whether it's your storage for your file server, which where you store your container data, they all have an impact on your solution. If that happens, sort of thing, you have, this is the scenario, you'll have your IT person being very confused about what the hell's going on because things start to fail. Support desk is going to go in meltdown because all the users are going to call saying systems aren't working. And at that point, you need to start securing the systems. You have to make a decision at that point. Can you do it yourself or do you hire a specialist? And it depends on the severity of what's happened. There's stuff with credit card companies that are investigating stuff of late. They'll monitor certain things and say, oh, they think something's happened. There'll be security alerts from your antivirus or your other systems that you're running on your systems, which may alert you, and you may catch that early, so therefore hiring a specialist may be not needed. Get all the way to the point you've got a complete lockdown of your system, different scenario. That is how you will feel if you're responsible for the systems when it happens. You'll be mortified, you'll be very angry, and there's no point actually interacting with anything in that mode. Calm down, take stock, have a look at where the landscape is of what's happened, and then remediate against the problem. If your FileMaker server is impacted, there are various levels. So just to highlight, obviously full encryption is the worst case scenario. If we're talking about a full encryption of ransomware, you've got partial encryption, you've got no encryption in your systems, and all the systems can be fine. You have all of these could have an impact. So the partial encryption for FileMaker could be container data has been encrypted, the actual files may not be, or the backup files have been affected, but the active files have not been. When you've got no FileMaker server encryption and attack, you could still have, if it's running on a Windows server, shall we say, you could still have IIS could be compromised, and a web service is all compromised. So it's a multifaceted process. When this happens, you start spotting that and a breach has occurred and something's gone wrong. At that point, you really have to look at what elements. You have to take an audit. You have to look at your server. You have to understand where the impact has been affected. Remediation steps. These are just best practices and follow processes. The first thing is lock down the entrance. So as I was saying about the north, south, east, west scenario, if they're onto your system, whoever it is or whatever happens, a rogue piece of software is running on your system, the first thing you've got to do is stop it from calling back out to then do any more damage or get any more payload into your network. To do that, lock down your router and ensure you're the only one that has access to the routing to your network. So absolutely lock it down. When I'm talking about lock that down, I do mean factory reset your router, set it to every port blocked, every service blocked, and only open up the service that allows you, your IP of your machine. If you're on the LAN and you're in the office, a bit different with COVID and remote working, all that sort of stuff. I personally think in the point of a breach, go to the office, plug into the network, do this, and pull the internet cable out of the wall. That's the only way you can be sure that no one else is in your systems and doing stuff. Once you know you're the only one there, you can start cleaning up your processes and fixing the fallout of what's happened. At that point, you have to make a decision. If you're a consultant or a developer working for another team, inform the IT department that you've detected something. You would hope the IT department would be informing you that there was an issue. That would be nice. But at that point, you've got to alert levels of the company, make sure everyone's informed. Transparency in data and knowledge is key. Absolutely. Don't think, oh, I'll just get this fixed and no one will notice, because there's a bigger fallout for what can happen with this. Depending on where you are in the world. If you're in Europe, the UK, pretty much there's a governing body that you should alert your information to. We have it here, the ICO. Not sure about the US. Someone can talk to me afterwards whether or not there is something and give me some more information. So if I do this talk again, it's more multinational. Decide whether you hire a consultant, as I said, take a deep breath, evaluate the landscape. That's the key thing. And that evaluation will not be quick. You think of, if you found a rogue piece in your scripting, in your code, in FileMaker, sometimes you scratch your head and you spend 2 or 3 hours hunting around to find out where you've done a set field incorrectly or you've done something wrong. This is the entire network and the entire infrastructure of a running server. It will take some time. Don't worry how long it's taking, follow the process, and each thing tick off and say, right, I've checked that, check this, and moved on. Eventually you get to the bottom of the list and say, there's nothing else we need to check. Okay. This is the next thing that everyone seems to forget. You have logs on your server, back them up. Take a copy of those logs because you may need them, because at some point, as I said, mentioned about notifying authorities, you might be going down the route. Someone's going to ask the horrible question, when did this happen? And the only way you can really tell when it happened, because if you didn't spot it as it happened, you're going to have to go through the logs and you're going to have to check things. You're going to need those logs to then help you diagnose when a breach or an issue actually occurred. So take a backup of them and just make sure everything's intact with the logs and keep them on a separate machine or copy them somewhere else because you may need them further. At that point, as I said, inform the authority to work out where you're going. And then it's focused on how you get your systems up and running. So it depends on the setup of your systems. I'm going to highlight a Windows environment. Quite a lot of people authenticate via AD. You've got file servers, database servers, web servers. You need all of those to work with FileMaker predominantly. So build them in the order that you need. If your authentication process is going via AD, without AD, you're not going to get back into your databases. So start with that. Work through those processes. Build your new servers. I don't mean restore them from a backup. I'm saying build the new servers. If you're in VMware, spin up a brand new VM, install the OS, install FileMaker. Don't take anything for granted from restorations, shall I say. I'll get onto the backups in a minute, but don't take anything for granted that you can just take a version of it. You can take a backup, you can take a snapshot from VMware. If you've checked your logs, you understood where the breach happened and you restore prior, and you absolutely know where that happened, you can go before that and restore your server because you know that was intact. As a safeguard, it's not a dangerous thing to do that if you're 100% sure you know when anything happened. If you can't be 100% and 99% isn't 100%, I just want to state that. So unless you're 100%, don't rely on the backups. You need those backups for the file integrity for what you're about to restore, yes, but don't take your whole server snapshots. I'd rebuild them. It doesn't take long to build a server. It's pretty quick. If you're running in a Linux server and you're running it in FileMaker on Linux, we've done demos here on this thing where you can deploy a new server in 15 minutes and go through the process. Do that again. Just do the process, get your new server built and be sure it's locked down. At that point, once your service is done, restore your data, enable log monitoring, something like Zabbix or anything like that. It's not essential to have log monitoring, but it helps for the future because that's the thing. You can then see the trends, see the regular performance of your server. You can see those metrics. You'll have something to then trigger that if anything happened again, you might have some sort of trend to see when it changed or moved. And then it's the point, the decision that needs to be made. You as developers that are supporting the server, you may go, my job's done. As those developers and as those people that are running your servers and hosting your FileMaker servers, I would be advising your client to say, well, we detected something did happen. It's a rebuild of all of the end user clients. Because if that end user client, that was the initial breach, don't lose sight of when I started this, malware appeared on Peter's machine, as I called him. Well, if Peter plugs in again, it just instantly compromises everything again. So go for a fresh install of all the workstations, attach them to AD, do your sync, and then go live. It sounds like a huge amount of work. If you're a small company, yes, it's still a huge amount of work, but not as much. If you're a massive company, it's a hell of a lot of work. But just bear in mind, that's the process. If you follow that, you should have a clean systems going forward. Server recovery. Right, mentioned the login before. Next thing you do is, in the event of anything, check your backups. Are your initial backups on your server intact? Do you have cloud backups? Yes or no? Check those. As I mentioned, if you're running in a virtual environment, check your snapshots. See whether you've got snapshots prior to when anything happens. And are any of the live files encrypted? I've seen it before where the backups are encrypted, encryption's run on the server, but for some reason the encryption tool that was used couldn't encrypt the FileMaker files because they were active in memory and open. So if you get to that point of view and you know everything else is done, don't just close your files, because the program that's doing the encryption may be active and running on a loop in the background. The best thing to do, initiate a new backup, then check those backups. Once they've fired and run, you'll get a new backup. Once that new backup's done, you can then check those backups and see whether they get encrypted straight away. If they do, you know you've got an active file. Then you've got to go into Task Manager, find the active file that's run. It'll be an exe running that somewhere, kill it, then run another backup. Don't close your active files, because as soon as you close your active files, you could then fall into the fact that they get encrypted. Okay. And most importantly, check the container data. There's various reports I've seen in the past where if container data is encrypted, so you've encrypted it and done secure storage, some of the encryption tools that are used by the threat actors out there won't encrypt an encrypted file. So therefore, by the nature of that, your container data could potentially stay intact. If you're running just standard, non-secure, right, you're just writing a PNG. So naturally, any encryption tool will fire and encrypt that. So depending on that, you've got different courses and different actions that you need to take. Okay. This is depend on the outcome, but these are the server processes that I would certainly recommend that you should do when you're building your new server and you've recovered. So you've got your backups, you know it's good, you've built your new server, you're configuring your FileMaker server. It goes without saying, only open the ports that you need to open. If you're in Windows and you've got the firewall on, make sure every single port is closed and then open 5003. It used to be open 16,001. Don't need to do that anymore. Wonderful FileMakers finally moved at the times and gone to 443. So you can get onto your server admin by 443, which is a very secure point, and that's fine. Make sure only the ports you've got are open, that need to be open. Restore your files from the last good backup, and then enable a backup strategy, depending on the backup strategy you've got. I always recommend 3-2-1. It's a known backup industry of a process. I'll explain what that is on the next slide. When your files have been restored, you've got to change your login credentials. You don't know if they've been compromised. You really got no knowledge of whether someone was in that file. Yes, you know the file's secure and it's okay and you've got a good backup of it, but you don't need to know if that admin credentials were compromised because you've gone from a backup where you're just restoring the same credentials onto your system. Make sure you update those. Update the admins is essential. Encrypt all your files and then go live. Okay. And I know I'm going over this relatively quickly. The slides will be there in the video, so you can go over this anyhow. 3-2-1. It's a known thing. A lot of the industry follows this. There's some talks about whether it should be 3.2.1.1. That's a more advanced version of it. But this is the most important thing. When you do your backups on your FileMaker server, FileMaker will do a single instance of a backup. Now, yes, you may be able to create 5 versions of that, because I'll do 5 instances, and FileMaker will then overwrite the oldest instance with the latest one. You've got 4 versions to roll back. That's not good enough. I have to stress, it's really not good enough. You should have 3 different copies of your data, okay? So that's like running FileMaker server on a schedule and say, hold 3. That's fine, it's in one location. The 2-bit should be on 2 different medias. You should definitely have your backup on a tape or on another medium if you can. Now that other medium could be another server. It could be a file server. It could be another drive attached, another way of doing this. And little ways to do that would be, you do your backups. Once your backup's completed, you run a local version of the file, which will copy it somewhere else. FileMaker will write to the backup folder for the whole thing. I really wish you could then have multiple backups running to different folders. That would be nice. Don't do it at the moment, not yet. But from that point of view, that's the 2. So you want 2 different media. So you've got hard drive on one, which is the FileMaker server, and then write it to potentially another hard drive, or if you write it to another hard drive, have something then that backs that up. Okay. So classic one is you write FileMaker and then you have Time Machine. Time Machine will write to that external device. So because you normally attach a hard drive. That's your 2. And then the 1 is the next stage of this. You then, whatever you write to that external media, you synchronize it, say, to the cloud. Now you can do that with sync.com, Google Drive tools, and you take all of your data that's there and you make sure it replicates to the cloud. That way, if your server gets compromised, which is the 3 section, which is your actual server, you will have 2, which is your other media. So your Time Machine backup, shall we say, has got another copy of it. Now, if that for some reason, because that's attached to the machine and could be configured to the machine, it could be get compromised. They may find the root from that and go, oh, they know they're doing this, they compromise that. The next stage is you then do the 1 and put it in the cloud. So unless you've got the keys to log into your cloud solution, there's really no way they should be able to affect that. That's not 100% right, but it's close, okay? And I'll explain a way to then make the cloud section 100% secure. And I do need 100%. So moving on. The bit I wanted to mention is don't assume you won't, you should assume you'll be next. Don't sit there thinking, oh, I think I've done everything, I should be safe. You're as safe as you were the last time someone told you, like me, saying how to follow best practices, because the best practices are moving every day because the threat actors are moving every day. So you have to stay up to date with this stuff. Just keep abreast of what's going on in the community and if there are any issues. If possible, make sure you got multiple backups, as I just mentioned. Now, with a cloud backup, the bit I wanted to highlight is the bit in red, consider object lock. This is a new technology that's come out from Amazon, Wasabi, Google do this now as well. Object lock is a way to write to a cloud server and not even the owners of the hard drives that you're writing to have the rights to overwrite that file. So it gets written there once, and usually the term is usually about 30 days. In 30 days' time, that file can be written over and amended or deleted or changed or done anything. But for 30 days, what you write to there is a one-time only write, and the infrastructure can't touch it at all. So that's a way to be 100% sure. When I did that backup to that cloud solution, it is true and it's not been modified because it can't be. And if you've got an object lock and you go to Wasabi and say, I want to purge my object lock, they say, yeah, fine, it will purge in 27 days because they can't even purge it. They can't touch it. So there's an option for that. I would certainly consider that. That gives you the total security that when that backup run and copied up to the server, it's secure. It's not been amended. So if the threat actors got into your system and then followed the route of all your backups, and then they purged everything, you know, because that object lock ran from a backup 3 days ago, they can't purge that. They can't amend it. They can't touch it. They can't do anything with it. It does mean you have to know that the threat isn't over 30 days old, if you see what I mean, because they could have injected something in there that then affects your backups. So you have to catch it. But I think Wasabi's just announced they do 90 days. Object lock is great. Do bear in mind though that when you're doing object lock, you've got to understand you need that amount of storage. So if you do a single backup of your server and it's a gig, well, it's a gig on Monday, you do a backup on Tuesday, it's another gig on Tuesday because it's object locked. You can't do hard linking to those files because it's locked. So you're doing a backup each time. So your storage is going to grow by 30 times potentially in the cloud. But storage is cheap. Data integrity is definitely worth paying for. That will solve your problem. Next one on the data document, be sure about knowing where your data is. I think it's the biggest thing in an attack or anything that happens. The panic sets in and you want a bit of clarity. You go, right, I know my container data is stored there. I know my files are stored here. This is stored there. Have a little document that knows where all your data is. It really is invaluable in that time of crisis when you're looking at it and going, I don't know, because you will miss something. You'll be in panic mode, you will miss something. If you've got a document knowing, all right, I've got all these files here. When anything happens, you can go to those locations, check the integrity of all those files and tick the boxes and say, yeah, I know they're all good. You've now covered your whole solution. It's worth spending, I don't know, a couple of hours working out where your data is stored. It won't take you long. Patching is key. Patch servers regularly. Patch once a week, once a month. Don't patch once a year. It's too long. You need to do it a bit quicker than that. Johan, shoot, mate.
Yeah, I got a really good compliment to what you're saying right now. There's a huge difference on what server you're on, and especially now where there's a new Windows Server coming out. So
Yep.
if you're still on Windows Server 2016, you definitely need to update to 19 because there aren't coming up as many updates there are on 19.
Yep, very true. Be on the latest versions of an OS where you can. Don't jump to the latest version first. I can't stress that enough. All these people that are using Macs and jump to Monterey as soon as it released, bad idea. So give it a few months, but Microsoft gives you 2019, I think it came out, I think it was late, I think it came out early 2020. But it's 2 or 3 years established now. It's getting patch updates. Be aware of your OS. Find out when your OS is stopped. FileMaker is usually, I think 10.14 is not getting security updates anymore. To make that clear, 10.14, if you've got anyone using 10.14 in anything that you touch, client, server, you name it, doesn't matter, they shouldn't be running it. There is no security patches, there's no updates for it. Any vulnerability found in any piece of software will not be patched in that version. 10.15's as old as you can go. And 10.15, I believe, is running out in November. So you have to then be on Big Sur. So you have to stay up to date with stuff. If you neglect that patching of OS, you are then setting yourself up for a hole that you can't fix. So then your data becomes compromised. Big one that is always contentious and a bit of an issue is antivirus. Should you have antivirus on a FileMaker server? Absolutely, you should. Should you allow it to scan FileMaker's files? Absolutely, you should not. But you have to have antivirus on your server because where they come in, there's a file going to be planted somewhere, it's going to alert. It's 10 times better to have antivirus on the machine than not. If you're running Windows, it goes without saying, absolutely. If you're running a Mac or a Linux infrastructure, it's questionable. You talk in the community. Mac, I would say you need it now. It's getting to the point where I think antivirus is such a key part because your Mac may then interact with a Windows machine and pass on the details. You won't know. So unless you've got something that's tracking for that and checking, it's an issue. Establish policies and procedures. It goes without saying, go for best practices. If, for example, I mentioned at the top of the shot, well, if you're reconfiguring your firewall, have a firewall edit log. It sounds simple, but if anyone goes to that firewall and changes anything, they say what they did, when they did it, what date, what time, or what was changed. That way, if then anything happens to a compromise, then you can roll back in that time and go, what's been changed since then? Oh, someone opened this. So have that audit log, have that check log. If you don't do that, then I think it makes it harder to investigate if in the event of anything, if you've got those tools available to you. And as I said, pen test is one option. You can get people to test your systems. I would advise you to pen test once a year if you can afford it and do it. It depends on the company you work for. It gives you that reassurance that a third party has then done those scans that a threat actor would be doing. They're going to be checking for those open balls. They're going to be checking for those holes and those loopholes. They're specialists in their field. They know how to do this. I have to say most pen testers are usually ex-hackers. That turns good, but that's fine. They're doing it for the good and they're telling you where the problems are. And then, as I said, the squishy person is the person that creates the malware in the first place. And they get sent it and they press the button, train the staff, make them security aware, explain to them how to open an email and read an attachment properly, check where it's come from, its origin, its source. Quite a lot of companies, and you can ask these questions, take this away. There's two things. You've got an SPF record that sits on the email that authenticates that the person, that the domain that sent this is authenticated. You have DMARC as well, which is an option of security that then authenticates the user against that email. If you're running a corporate system of any kind or a business of any kind, you haven't got those systems on your email. I would be able to send an email and it would come from Jul, his company, if he hasn't got DMARC on. And the end user would not know. So I would send it and say, yes, sorry, I've changed my bank account details. Please pay me this amount. And Jul's accounts team would then just pay me. But the thing is those services help you with malware, help you stop that threat, because it's going to be an email that usually starts it. Consider partnering up with a security company if it's you've got a big enough budget to do with that, and you work with a big enough company. I've actually Sensei, they're very good. Darktrace are very good as well. These are companies that are putting a monitoring box on that switch on your network. So not the north-south, as I mentioned earlier, it's the east-west. They are packet sniffing every packet on your network. And their devices are geared and honed to find miscellaneous traffic. That's what it does. As soon as it picks it up, the higher level ones like Sensei and Darktrace can then do an instant, Extra Hot does it to a certain degree. It does an instant lock of the packet, so they can disrupt the packet on the network level. So therefore, it was being malicious and they can stop it instantly. Without even turning the infrastructure off, they just put a packet mask on anything that packet ID will not get delivered. And it just kills it off the network. So if you've got a breach, you can stop it that way. And those systems then would alert you to there was a breach, or there was an issue, there was malicious processes running on your network. You can go and investigate. And if you have huge amounts of money, you can hire an ethical hacker to then come in and hack that. That's in effect what the pen testers are doing to a certain degree, but to a much higher level. They are not cheap, but if your systems are that important, you can go to that level. Considerations, as I've mentioned, the backups are key. I stress this all the time. The bit that most people don't understand with backups, they I've run a backup once a day. What's the frequency of loss to the business? You as developers and you as companies that are hosting your FileMaker solution, you have to ask the question of the client, what is your maximum downtime is acceptable? You don't ask that question, I don't feel as developers as we deliver our solutions, we've done our job right. We have to ask the client, what's the maximum loss you can have? Can you have a down for an hour? And yes, the client's always going to say 0. All right, just laugh, because 0's almost not, you can get it, but it's not cost effective. It's not fair to ask for 0. There is always a point where it can be down. If you go in and say, I've got a patch, so don't forget, if I mentioned you've got the patching regime, when you do a patch, you have to bring the server down. You have to restart it. So you're going to have a bit of downtime. So, well, okay, we've got a patching system. We patched last month, it was down for an hour. Well, you can be down for an hour then. So from that point of view, you can be okay. So I ask that question because that really does determine what your strategy is for your backups. So you need to know you've got backups that comply with that. I mentioned the monitoring. Absolutely, any event monitoring, log monitoring, anything you've got on your server, you need to have on the server nowadays. FileMakers learned the errors of their way and what they did with the server. They had a log, but then it took it away from the admin, which made it problematic for us lot to see the log. Stuff like Zabbix came about from what Soliant did, which is brilliant, and that takes to the next level, to be fair. But now they've put the log back into the admin console. Make sure you've got something that's monitoring that log. If it's a user, that's a start. I'd have a system that does it like Zabbix or some other solution. Nice thing with those end user solutions is you can integrate those to notification systems like Slack. So we have on ours that if there's a blip on the network or there's a user that logs in weird, it can detect that in the log and then fire a Slack message to us and say the following event has occurred. You as a developer then get notification of that information prior to a bigger fallout of an issue in the log. It's a useful way of keeping you informed about what's going on. Mention patch and update. Monitor security blogs. There's millions of things online you can follow. I've mentioned this one a few times. Security Now by Steve Gibson is an awesome security podcast. It will scare you when you first listen to it because it'll all be high-level breaches that have happened in the industry. It's a really good start. And the nice thing, what he does most weeks is, certainly when it's Patch Tuesday for Microsoft, it'll go over what's in that Microsoft patch. It'll tell you what the vulnerabilities are within that, what is closed, the loopholes is closed, and tell you severity. So some months there's very little that's going on. It's not important. The last few months, back in November, there was Log4j, which I think I've mentioned in other podcasts, other events and stuff that I've done. That was a massive breach. But the point is the industry then finds out about it, and then you start, when you listen to that podcast, you start to listen to how companies are starting to mitigate against that. So you as a user then also learn that. So it's worthwhile. It's an hour of your week. I would certainly recommend you listen to it. It's not that long. And then from that point of view, goes without saying, make sure your passwords are strong. It's the starting point. It's the entry into your file. We've mentioned about other ways to authenticate, which you've got OAuth, you've got the Claris ID, you've got external authentication tools. I'd strongly link them into something like Google or Azure AD or go down that sort of route if you can. Access privilege, make sure your privilege sets are right. What Robert was sort of implying about before about user levels of access. If you limit the people's access of what they can and can't do in the system, you know that if certain fields are changed or certain data has been changed, you technically will know who did it. So it's that side of stuff. It helps you check the integrity of files in the event of any issues. And the rest of it I've mentioned already. The most one is when you walk away from this, build a disaster recovery strategy, build a plan. And if possible, it's very hard to test a DR plan, but try and test it, simulate the failure, try and go through the process, do the best you can with that. The best way would be is go, right, okay, I'm going to assume that file is corrupt. And just make that assumption. Go to your backup, do a restore of it. Make sure you can do a restore of it. Check the records. There's a lot of talk that happened years ago about the point of having a clone that you can import all the data into. And we as developers build systems like that for data integrity. Well, we build these systems. Did we test them? Did we do that clone, pick it up and do the import of the live file into it? If you did, great. If you use the recovery tools to do stuff, to check stuff, make sure you go through that process. And then that's the best advice I can give you. It's a starting point. This thing will never end. I think the point of breaches is getting worse. It's growing still. It's become a business. As scary as it is a business to them. So they're out to make money. They don't care. There's no emotional link to you. It's totally emotionless. It's a process, a job they do. They encrypt the data. They do what they need to do. They get paid ideally, and they move on. If you've got all the backup strategies in place and you've got all the processes in place, hopefully you would never have to pay the ransom. You would never have to pay for that recovery in that respect, because you should have the infrastructure to go, I can roll back a day and I'm okay with that as a business and I'm okay. That's better than paying whatever it is, because every time it gets paid, anytime you pay someone, it fuels that business. So, and the only way to stop it, stop fueling it. So ideally. So that's it. I'd like to say thanks. I'm open to questions. Yes, I'll be in the virtual bar later, so you can ask questions there as well. If you've got any questions, please ask.
Great presentation, Gary. Ran more smoothly than last time.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I've shared a link in the chat. McKinsey had a really good article recently on this, actually looking at it more from the business perspective and talking about preparation and communicating with management beforehand and having a plan. So if in the event this happens, everybody in management actually knows what the next steps are, and you're not going to have the chaos of dealing with something where you're making it up on the fly. But also they talk about the importance of knowing legally what you can and cannot do, i.e. talk to the legal department. Are you prevented legally from paying the ransom? Or because they're saying that some organizations may have issues around that, and knowing that in advance is a whole lot easier than dealing with it in the crisis.
Yeah, the stuff with the crisis. Let's hope you've got a plan. I think that's the most important thing. I hope you've got a plan. If you don't have a plan, then yeah, it's a bit more frantic and chaotic. But you're absolutely right. It's those things that once you know what to do, you can actually get on and do the job to recover. What you don't want to be doing is running around and trying to work out what's the next action we need to take. You're right, if legal's involved as well, you start needing to get legal involved, then you've got an awful lot more work to do. And legal will tie you up in knots for ages, saying what you can and can't do, and what you can say, you can't say, what you can release, what you can't release. There's a whole load of stuff there. If you've got it documented, you've got something to follow. And it's quite hard to produce that document, to be honest, because you never know the extent of what the incident is that happens with you. But I think you've got to engage your head and think, right, as I mentioned on the slide, the worst case scenario, take a full lockdown, full breach. Plan for that. If you plan for that, it's only going to be better. And I think that's the key thing. There's a lot of content around this now, more and more. For the last couple of years, it's massively ramped up. But I think us as developers have got to now be more proactive in pushing that out and advising the customer. It's not your job to do this. I must stress this. It really isn't your job to do this. If you're deploying a FileMaker server, it's not your job. Your job is to know and advise. If you're working with an IT team who's resident in that company, ask the questions of the IT team, challenge them. I think that's the point I'm trying to get across. Ask those questions of the teams and make them verify that they've got stuff in place. And then if they've already got infrastructure in place to mitigate against some of this stuff, it might help you then go, well, I can tap into that. If they've already got a good backup strategy, all you've got to do is write your file to the first location in that strategy, and the rest will follow. So you can then go away and go, I know the backups are good. It gives you that reassurance, so you can ask those questions.
Great presentation, Gary. Yes, I would just like to add just a couple of things. The first thing being that on top of those things, you should never use an admin or root users in your operating system, which is the easiest way, the easiest. The top one preferable popular way of hackers entering the OS. So no root, no admin usernames, because those are the usernames that are usually targeted. And one more thing, specific on FileMaker. I was once appointed by a client to hack his FileMaker server. Basically, the problem was that he didn't have admin access. And he said, can you do that? I said, I need to check some things first. So I first checked that the license was indeed the client's. So, it was their own server. And next I said, okay, I can try. I can, the files were not encrypted. And there's a very popular tool that if your files are not encrypted, anyone can crack them. If you are not already aware of that, there's a Windows tool that basically you get the FileMaker file, and within seconds, it removes every password. So it shows you a list of usernames and no password, so you can just log in. So if you give me a file without encryption, I can just crack it. So always encrypt your files. And that raises a big question about what about sharing secure files. And the last thing that I did, and that's the last thing I'd like to highlight about securing FileMaker servers, is I tried to reset the password. Instead of doing anything, the first thing I did was, okay, can I reset the password? Because the PIN, the only thing that is needed to reset the password in the FileMaker server is a 4-digit PIN. And guess what? The PIN was 4 zeros. I just tried the first thing, 4 zeros, and that was it. So always encrypt your files and never use 4 zeros, 1, 2, 3, 4 for FileMaker server PIN. Because it's not just ransomware that can hack you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things with the PIN is the thing I always struggle with that is the fact there's no real way around it. You should put it in, that's fine. You can put a random set of 4 numbers, that's fair enough. But I've always been conscious of what FileMaker does to secure that. I've never asked the question, to be honest, is after 3 attempts, does it block the pin? It'd be great if it did similar to what an iPhone does when you get your code wrong. You get it wrong and then it waits an hour. You get it wrong again, it waits 2 hours. And then get it wrong again, it waits 4 hours. Get it wrong again, you could end up locking your file for 400 years. That's fine. That's the whole point of the security. That's good. But I don't think it does. I think you could probably build a bot that goes start at 0 to 9999. You're in.
Yeah, there's actually GitHub with the common credentials, which has pin by frequency of use. So you just get the bot to just scroll down that list.
Yeah, and my concern would be is how long would that take? Is there, if the server then locks up and says, no, I'm going to put a pause in there, like as I said, for an hour, it's not great deterrent, but it's good enough. It's good enough. That would stop it. But if you could just run a bot on that and just go, and it can get from 0 to 10,000 less 1, and it could do that in a minute. Doesn't matter what your server admin is. I mean, doesn't matter. There is no security in your server at all because they can reset the password. As soon as they get a ping, they reset the password. They're on your server. They can delete all the files, they can close all the files, delete all the files, remove all the files.
Okay.
So and that comes back to what I was saying about that east-west thing. The important thing is stopping that happening. If they're on your network, I hate to say it, it's a matter of time before it's game over. You've got to stop getting onto that network, first of all, secure your server properly, close all those ports, don't allow that entry in. You can do that, you're beating half of the problem, really, if not most of the problem. As I said before, it comes down to an individual being on your network. That's then
exactly. And also block the SSH port, which is 22, if I'm not mistaken. That's another essential part of being secure. Great. Great. So yes, Gary, I think your presentation was not just the specifics are available online, but just bringing it up, I think it triggers a nice series of discussions that we need to do with our clients within our organizations. It's hot topic. Nice. Thank you.
Thank you. Super. As I say, I will be in the virtual bar. If anyone's got any questions on that, I'm happy to answer them. Please ask. I agree. I think we should all be talking about this now. It's getting to the point where you can't hide from this. It's out there. We need to be sure what we're doing. FMBug Help.
Yeah, FMBug Help. Anyone got anything they want to either say or ask about? Hot tip of the day, even.
I haven't got a hot tip of the day, but I've got an issue. I've got an issue that we come up against, and I don't have the full specifics of it because Ben had developed it. He actually gave me the actual script, so which I could show, but which I haven't got a problem showing. But I'll be honest, it's my fault. I should have got a bit more information behind it. Let me just quickly share my screen. The incident is I'll ask the question because you like my fix it in seconds. He was exporting container data with the starting script step that he's got in his script is set error capture on. Okay, so in theory, if error capture's on, if an error comes up, you shouldn't get a dialog box. Okay, agreed? Everyone agrees with that. Except every time we're trying to write the export contents, the container contents, we're getting a dialog box coming up saying you don't have permissions, are you okay? And you have to press the OK button. You have to press the OK button. So it locks the whole machine in the middle of the script and it requires user interaction. At first, I thought it was a FileMaker version thing because, and this is for another demonstration, another time we got a bot system and we got 2 bots that are running 18, 2 bots that are running 19, just for completeness of what we do, covering the versions. We thought it may be an 18 thing. We tested and moved that task only to run on the 19 bots. No, same thing. It's not every time. It seems to be like a permissions thing, and this could be security, it could be a load of things that are causing this. Has anyone seen this when you, I'm just going to be absolutely sure when he's what the script is, export field contents. And in there is a file in the container, and he's exporting that field contents and writing it to a location. when he tries to write to that location, occasionally, and I do mean occasionally, it fails. And it doesn't fail completely and stop. It throws a dialog box saying you don't have, like, unable to write file to location. And you have to press the OK button. Go, shoot.
Yes.
Are there any strange characters within the names? Because that could be a problem.
Not that I'm aware of, but it's certainly one I'll take back. I'll have a look. It could be, yeah. It could be the fact that, yeah. But the thing is, the script does work most of the time.
Yeah, but if you do have some strange characters, sometimes the OS will just interrupt and say this is not a okay way to save, because it might hold a slash or something that's not capable of saving a file with. And then the second thing is that if you're on a terminal window, so terminal machine, sometimes the users don't have access to store files on all locations, and then it could be a hassle to go through the management of setting that up. And sometimes a user that looks like they have the same privilege don't. So therefore, you can't really save the files to a file folder that you think it's working on one location, but not on another one. Did it make any sense? Or
yeah, I agree with you that in this instance, I think we're okay because it's our bots that are doing it, so they've got permissions. So I'm sure they're all set the same, and that we've got the same machine. We set it on one bot to run, and then sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So that shouldn't be a permission thing in that respect. So I get where you're coming from. The file name does have forward slashes in it because it's using SMB, so it has to, and it saves to Windows. So I can't take slashes out, but it looks well formed. So,
and if you add FileMaker's own external error message to see what error code it comes out if it doesn't go through,
we don't get an error code. We've debugged it. We've managed to put pauses after the dialogue to see what the last error was. There isn't an error code.
Strange.
Yeah, I'm hoping it's a bug, but it's one of those things that's happened, and it's only on this scripting, and it's we don't have many scripts that do export container data. We do have some, but in this instance, it's heavily on that.
It's not trying to write to a file that's already open, is it? With an identical name.
We thought of that at first. I'm going to just share the screen now. Let me just share this code. Hopefully you will see that. Fingers crossed you see that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I can make it bigger. Is that bigger? Yeah, I can't see the screen, so I'm hoping.
Yeah, I can see that.
So yes, it's this point here. So so the error capture is definitely on. Come down. It's a loop of many files in containers. So it's an if and basically depending on what parameter gets run. So we'll export customer comic information or whatever it is, and it's that export field contents, and it goes to the export path. He tries to, you can put in, I'll check the file, see whether it's open, I'll delete it first. So he's added so many bits to this script of what to do and processes. The path, as you rightly said, is further up here. So we've got an export folder and a name. So.
Right. Is it the line that says create folders? Yes. Third from the bottom.
No. It's well, yeah. Well, it's that. It'll create the folders if it needs to. Yeah, it's that line. The export.
All right. Content. I mean, just a shot in the dark here. Maybe, I don't know. Can you create the folder separately? Give it a little bit less work to do.
Potentially. Yep. Yep. Well, what we can do is we can have the folders already created. We could probably do it. I think he's creating an ID on the folder name, so you can track each write. But we could find a way of doing that possibly. Yeah.
Are you certain that the network drive is mounted?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely should be, Ian. There's no reason why it shouldn't be, and for it to fail sometimes, I would say it would always be mounted. So our bots normally mount those volumes. So I would hope it could be a network blip, I suppose, at the times it goes wrong and the network drive falls off. It could be the client falls off the network in that respect. It could be.
What
but it's
method
throwing
of
a dialogue that I couldn't understand why it throws a dialogue, because it shouldn't throw that dialogue.
what method of SMB hosting are you using? Is it like it's on a Mac Mini, right? So it's using the SMB connection from like just connect to server.
Yeah.
And have you ever run into instances where it's disconnected and reconnected to the SMB share and has appended like a -1 to the name of the share? Because I've had that quite a lot with my users.
I haven't seen that, not on the bot.
Because if you're writing to a dedicated network path, then that can hit an error.
Okay. Well, that's something to look at. So if the mounted
Because
volume's got
so
any,
it'll look like
any of the IDs on it.
So essentially what happens is the path goes from like volume / network share / whatever to becoming volume / network share -1 / whatever. So if you've got that going on, you want to ideally, because it's on a Mac, you should in theory be able to use the Apple script step to exit out of the network shares, reset the available ones and reconnect back.
Okay, we'll have a look, because I think if that fails at the point the dialogue's there, I could just hide FileMaker and just do a terminal check of what mounted volumes are on there.
Yeah,
and I can just see what's on there and see if
I've had that a lot,
different.
Especially with users that are having intermittent network, because the Wi-Fi is not always the best for some people.
It is all wired box, as I say, it's a dedicated attached machine. So, shouldn't happen, but crap happens. I don't know why that does it. But it's the same process throughout this. So we just go through the same process of different things depending on the type of thing that's calling it. So one bit of this script, this section of this if, basically, that section of that if from
Tony
there
White
to here basically is about the same. So,
yeah, Tony White put something quite useful in the chat, which is a base element script step, by the way.
Yes, yeah, I just saw that, so I'll make a note of that as well. So okay, brilliant. That was my question. I very
Gary,
know me. Yeah, shoot.
Gary, yeah, just this isn't very helpful, but I have seen a dialog box like you're talking about before, and I can't remember exactly when, but it may have been exporting, and there's no error message, there's no error code that you can trap. And I have seen, I just wanted to say I have seen it before, and I don't think it's, well, maybe it's a bug, but I seem to remember it was obviously like a operating system error being fed back to FileMaker, not a FileMaker error. Does that make sense? So
yeah, I think that's pretty much bang on. I think it's a bizarre.
So you can't trap it.
No, you can't trap anything. There's
so I have seen it before, which is not very helpful, but you're not the only one.
I've seen it as well, but this is about 5 or 6 years ago, and I can't remember exactly.
I can't either remember exactly when, Ian. I'm trying to remember. If I find out, I'll let you know, Gary.
Yeah, if for some reason divine intervention happens and you remember, please let me know, because it'll be useful. You all know me well, and I very rarely get stumped by these things. I normally go find out, and I'll put trapping in everywhere in every file possible and debug it. And usually I find the thing. This one has stumped me. I very rarely get stumped on stuff like this, and it's just like, I don't know. No idea at all.
It's always, there's one user in specific that every time they run the script, this error or something very similar to them happens. Because the way this script works I'm using, it saves a PDF onto our share drive. And every time we get an error that's quite similar to yours, and it happens maybe like once a month, this guy will run it and it will hit the volume error. So
bizarre,
definitely check for that.
But other times it'll run and it'll run fine with that.
Yeah. And the solution is either restart or just use Apple script to just wipe the networks and reconnect.
Fair enough. Here we go. I'll try and do it. What I might do is just script round before that script starts to kill the network connections and reconnect them at the start. So we're already doing that anyhow. So maybe we'll debug for that and see if that solves the problem. So I'll keep you informed. I'll update you at the next event. So,
cool.
Thank you. Any other questions? Anyone got anything? Don't ask me, because clearly I don't know how to fix anything.
Or any other hot tips of the day, if anyone wants to share any.
yeah, if anyone's seen anything.
I've seen anything unusual or whatever. I think Gary's was a prime example of something unusual. I think I've seen that too. No, we could open the bar.
I will stop the recording. I will mark it off now. Stop the recording, and we'll keep the session going. And you're more than welcome to stick around and just have a general chat about everything. I'm sure the Apple event will come up. I've got some questions on that. I was thinking about that when we were talking about stuff. So.